Kayuk and Shalom family. Hi everybody. So I wanted to cover in this particular video, I'm going to try to keep this one as brief as possible, even though I have a lot to cover. I'm going to be moving pretty quickly because I think our people, we get this for the most part, but I want to address this comment that I received from one of these people out here, these Moors. They call themselves Moors, Moabites, but they're really just Canaanites. They've been living in our land for a long time, Hamites pretending to be our people. He sent me a comment that says, and I'm going to just read it to you here. It says, the indigenous people are black. Okay, so basically he's debating, he's trying to essentially refute the fact that this is our land and we have been here for thousands of years. Okay, so what he's saying is, no, the land belongs to Ham. So listen to this. He says, the indigenous people are black, but they are Hamites from the line of Ham, not Shem. Everybody wears fringes. We don't look like them because they are Hamite. Okay, you mean he don't look like them? Okay, so because he's not a Shemite, he's probably just, who knows whether he's a white guy or some Hamite pretending to be us. But let me tell you, these people are all about confusion. We have so many of these little groups out here and individuals that are pretending to be us, and they're all about confusion because that's what the enemy does. He uses people, pretending to be you. And this is what he's. This is why a lot of these groups have already been infiltrated, because they're being funded by the enemy. A lot of them operate under the nonprofit, so-called 501c. I like to call it the 501c gag order, which some of them, as nonprofits, they pretend to be our people, but they're really Islamic organizations. Some of them are really, from Islam or, Christians that are still caught up in Christianity, but they're still, they're operating in the guise of being, Hebrews. But they're under the 501c, so they get, so they don't have to pay taxes. While they run their little scams, and especially these, some of them are former Christian ministers that are still operating, their little Christian, Baal houses, but unfortunately they are running around now, again, under the guise of pretending to be Hebrews and just running their money scams and really just ripping people off and deceiving folks. It's just one of many, as is this guy who, is part of all this and was watching a video from one of these people that I'm going to show you in a minute. But I want to address this. So what he's saying is that he's saying that the Hamites, the indigenous people, were just Hamites. Well, this is the problem with people who are ignorant, of history. Some of these people really are, they're all about confusion, some of them are stuck on stupid, no doubt, but some of them, are deliberately, all about causing confusion because they don't want our people united. They've been on our land, their ancestors, the Canaanites, and this is our scriptures tell us this, for a very long time, and they want to, continue to be on our lands because in their mind, because their people were here, just as long as we have been here, I don't question or debate that. It says in the scriptures that they were illegally in our lands, and we were supposed to drive them off, but we didn't. And that's why we're in this mess. So anyway, but what I want to do is, before I show you that video, I would like to cover the scriptures here. I always say, before I go into the proof to show you, because I'm sure you guys get this, but this is for this, idiot that came onto my channel with this rhetoric. I need to refute this guy and put this whole thing, because I saw a video of somebody else who actually said the same thing about everybody wears fringes. Well, that's not, these people are ignorant of our people. First of all, if they even knew what the name of our people, Hebrew, if they even understood what that meant, they would understand a lot more about, history, and they certainly wouldn't be, coming off with a lot of this foolishness. So at any rate, we're going to talk about it. So I always say start with the scriptures, look to the scriptures, because it is our history books. Okay, it's our history. So if we go to, and what I did was I looked up in the concordance, I looked up through the verses and scriptures the word west. So if we look at the word west, as in Western Hemisphere, we look at the word west here. we will find, it says, I want to go to Genesis here, chapter 28:14. It says, "And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee, and in thy seed, shall the families of the earth be increased." Now, I'm going to stop right there. Now, notice it says, "And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and shall spread abroad to the west, east, north, and south." So they're talking in all directions. Our people have, we're spreading out, which means, because I covered this in my other video, my last video, that actually showed you a map of, our land and covered the book of Jubilees. Very important chapter that I covered in Jubilees that talked about all of this, that we had a really extensive territory, and it just wasn't, West Africa in the East, what they call the so-called Middle East, where today they call, the land of Israel. Our land was much more, our territory was much more extensive than that, and I want to talk about that. So if we look at this word here in the concordance, west, and one thing I noticed is that they tend, for the word west, they use more than one concordance number. Now you got to ask yourself, for one word west, why so many different concordance numbers? Well, that's because they were trying to hide information. Okay, so they would know based on the number what they were referring to when they use this term, the west. But we're going to get to the heart of the matter here. So if you look at the word west here, it's H3220. The word in our language is it's saying here Yama, but actually in our Shemitic it's Wayama. Okay, and what it says here, it means sea. They tend to associate the west with the sea, and it says, but it's more than the sea. It's more than that. It's not just the sea. So it's westward, west side, and so on. And then, and they also associate with the Mediterranean Sea. Now you have to understand, because they were they were fabricating history and trying to write their history. They mixed in their history with our history. This is why the modern translations you read today tend to associate the West with the Mediterranean Sea, but in the KJV, they don't have the Mediterranean Sea associated with it. Okay, because they were changing it. But if you look at this, it says, seaward, west, westward, west and westward, and it says from an unused root. Now I want to show you something here. Now notice here, it doesn't tell you the origin of the root. It says from an unused root, meaning to roar. Now that word roar, I want you to remember that word, because the thing about languages is language is associated with sound, and yes, words have meaning. It's so interesting. It's so funny. I heard one of their people say that in a lecture they gave, that words have meaning. No kidding. Very much so. And that word roar is actually very significant, and it means really something else, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's keep going here. So there's another verse I would like to refer to here regarding the West, and that verse is Isaiah chapter 49 verse 12. It says, "Behold, these shall come from far and low, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim." Okay, so let's look at that. No, look at that in a different translation. That's the KJV. Let's look at it in the NSB. So if we look at that translation in the NSB, it says, give me a minute here. Okay. It says, "Behold, these will come from afar, and lo, these will come from the north, and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim." Okay? Behold, these will come from afar. They will come from the north, from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. So let's take a look at that word Sinim. So if we look at that, look up the word Sinim, this is what we get. That word Sinim, it's H5515. He's telling you in terms of, again, root etymology of an otherwise unknown name. So they're telling you they don't know where that name came from. They don't know where that root came from. Now, I tell you, white folks lie by omission. You understand that. They admit some things and they omit the rest. They delete it or hide it. Okay? So what I think is really funny is that, let's see what it says. It says, a people living at the extremity of the known world may be identified with the inhabitants of South China. Now you gotta laugh about that. Southern China. So in other words, they're saying these people come from the Oriental region. Okay, China. Okay, that's Asia. All right, Central Asia. Okay. Now, why is that very significant? Because we have to look at, and see, the thing that I love about history, and I love more importantly about our people's history and the historical records of our history, the scriptures, is that no matter what these people have done to hide information, throwing all their layers of dirt on it, okay, that, to just, deliberately mistranslate things, the history reigns true, okay? If you look at the history of our people living in the Americas, who crossed the Bering Strait? What people came over here? And they actually used to replace us, on our own lands. Were they not, those people that crossed the Bering Strait, they call that are Eurasian, that they call the so-called Native American today, did they not come from Asia? They were coming from Siberia, the areas of Siberia, the mountains of Russia, the Altai Mountains, as well as, Mongolia. They're Mongolian people, essentially. And then they went into Alaska, and from there they crossed that long bridge known as the Bering Strait. Okay? And their own geneticists, these folks, whites have done the study to even prove genetically the DNA where they came from. Okay? They were not indigenous to this land. Never have been. They tend to pop up in a lot of the history. You see the pictures the colonists drew. The further you go back in history, you find the people of these lands were darker. Okay, and the more forward you go in history, like 1700s and onward to 1800s and 20th century, you'll find that they got whiter and whiter. Those people, so-called Native Americans, is because why? Of the fact that they created that admixture when they began to intermarry. They intermarried them. The whites mixed with them, as well as they were mixing them. They were basically those people were also mixing with the Hamites as well. And then they were even forcing their genetic assimilation on our people, putting them in our lands at the time when our people were still there, in our lands, our territories rather. So, but that's what I'm saying to you, is that here it is, and it's in the scriptures. It tells you the history of how these people came here. Okay. So, now, if we need further proof about all of this, let's go into the, so remember that word war I was telling you. So if we go in to Zechariah, okay, chapter 8, verse 7, it says, well, thus says the Most High, behold, I am going to save my people from the land of the east and from the land of the west. So you gotta understand, the Most High is basically, He's got to deliver us. He is going to deliver us, from both our territories and our lands in the east as well as the west. Okay, because you have to understand, we are literally surrounded around our enemies. We're surrounded, by our enemies. You know, we've got, we got the sons of Japhet, as well as these Canaanites that are still in our lands today that are posing, pretending to be our people. Everybody pretending to be our people, pretending to be our people, these Canaanites, Moabites, whatever you want to call them, but they go under the guise of Moors, and now, and they say, you'll notice they'll talk about everything, that they're everything except for Canaanites, and Hamites. They call themselves children of Shem, and they're not. Okay, because you can always tell a tree by its fruit. Okay, so let's take a look at this particular verse. So this particular verse, it talks about, when you look at the word the West, it's H3996, and that's a different concordance number, you notice. Now in this particular word, okay, same word West, but they use a different number. It says the Hebrew or Shemitic it's Maba, Mabo, okay, but in our language would be Amabawa, okay. Now, and it tells you it's westward, again West. But if you take a further look at this word, it also says it means, very important, it means sunset. Sunset west. You ever hear the expression, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west? And when they use that expression, it's also in the scriptures, okay? When they use that expression, they are referring to, what do they typically refer to? They're referring to the Western Hemisphere, okay? It's just that simple. So, and notice they use the word sunset. So let's take a look. Remember I was 10. Let's go back. Let's look at the concordance. So if we go into the concordance, and that word set, okay, that word set is the word maraca. But you remember that I told you that, and I'm going to come back to that for a minute. But if we look at that word, you remember that word they used, they said meaning to roar? They're saying it means war. But what the word is actually associated, they use is, not say, was what they associated with the word behind, and the synonym for behind is the word rear. Okay, but they used the word war. Okay, they knew, and it wasn't a typo. They knew exactly what it meant. Okay, so if you type in the word rear, this is the word you get. Okay, because they associate that word with typically behind, hinder part. Okay, but if you look at that word, what it actually means, they associate this word west with hinder part or behind. But if you look at that word, it doesn't mean war, it means rear, because that is the synonym for behind. You get the word Uraka. Okay, and the meaning, they give you the translation, it's coast. Now, coast is typically associated not with sea, but with what? Land. The geographical location. And notice the word raka. See, that is just, they're not going to put the whole word in there, but if you look at the root of the word, it's raka, which is just the root of the word amaraka. And they're not going to put the whole word in there because obviously it would be too obvious. You'd figure it out. So anyway, because it's there. But that's what the word is. Now, if we go back to that word sunset, remember I was telling you the word they used for sunset was amobawa. So if we look at the word set, we only have to put in the whole word. Just set, for sunset. And if we scroll down, we get the word, give me a minute here, kind of all the way at the bottom, we get the word mamaraka. Again, same sound, same word, mamaraka. You remember the video I just did? The last video, most recent video, I showed you a map that was done, in the Middle Ages, that actually showed an area, okay, that was called Mamaraka, okay, because why? And it was right next to, the land they so-called Judea, was on one of their middle, maps that was done, more than 300 years, 400 years ago. So what's interesting about all that is that it's the same word, okay? So it's the word from America, Okay, and here it is here. And so they're not going to put that whole word sunset in it so you can find it. So that's why they put the word set. You know, you understand? They abbreviated it. This is how they, it's just how they hide information. Okay, but it's the same word. All right. So I wanted to show you that because I thought that was really, really important. So the other thing I wanted to do was I want to take a look at, let's take a look at this video, and then we're going to talk about that video real quick. So let's go to this video that this guy was talking about. Sorry. Just got to find it. Alright. So we're going to click on this video now. I'm not going to go and show you the whole thing, but the guy that he uses, okay, let's go back a little bit here. Now, let me tell you something about the person that he refers to in this video. This guy, who did this video, people have already exposed these folks. I'm not even going to get into it. You can do your own, brothers and sisters. I wouldn't even waste your time. But this guy walks around. Again, you can tell a tree by its fruit. Walk around pretending to be our people. Some of these people, and again, this guy was a former Christian minister. That's still operating under Christianity under that 501. He is registered as a 501c. His entity, his little scam business. He's ripping people off of money, and it's the whole thing. I mean, and people that know these folks have already exposed this guy. So I'm not going to get into all that because I don't have time to waste my time with people pretending to be us or people that are not. Whether they're, look, it doesn't matter even if you have the lineage, if you are not striving to be, righteous, as, the Most High would want us to be, and if somebody's operating under the guise of wickedness, it will be exposed. And it's just that simple. So, it's not just about lineage, it's about, being Hebrew in heart. And people that are operating and running scams, trying to scam people out of money, they're going to be exposed. But we got a lot of these people pretending to be us, and you can even tell them. You can even tell. Again, our people are like-minded. If you're a Shemite, you're like-minded, a child of the Most High, and you're seeking understanding. You don't operate under stupidity and ignorance because you're striving to understand. And you be doing all the things you need to be doing, like learning the ancient language of our people, not pretending by, having a dozen Bibles, like, some of these people, they'll show you they got a dozen books, but they don't even read half of them, because if they read half of them, they would be doing their homework, and then more importantly, they would be reading and understanding the most important book, which is the historical, writings of our people, and learning the ancient Shemitic language, not the so-called modern Hebrew, because it's, that's just another filter, another layer. So anyway, but let me show you. Here's the thing that really I think is very amusing about this video, and just really helps you to show that some folks are really the ignorance of these people. Okay, let me show you this. So what they did was, let me go back just a little bit. Okay. So they're showing you the Hamites, okay, and telling you that these people were already in these lands. No kidding. Then they show you the so-called Native Americans today, their ancestors that arrived here across the Bering Strait. Now, here's the problem I have with this. One of the many problems. We'll cover this in a minute. Just watch. What they started to do, what they did here is they took all these pictures of these Mongols, the native, so-called Native Americans they're showing, and then let me stop. And then they start showing you people that were of our people. They were mixing their photographs with actual people that are our people, Shemitic, people. And the reason why is, again, it's kind of like under this, the premise of what, white, so-called, these white folks tend to, they have a saying where they like to say, you know how all darkies look alike. And this is how they thought that they could group us all, you know, together, you know, both peoples, different peoples that were living here, both Hamites and Shemites, and say, call us under, you know, all Negroes and Moors or Africans, lie to us, my people, and tell us that we're Africans, that we would just believe it, because under the premise of, you know, all darkies look alike, and these people are operating the same way. And that's why I said you can always tell a tree by its fruit, okay, because, you know, ignorance is not bliss, and there is no way you can look at some of these photographs, like this boy is not one of those people, okay? This guy is, you know, you can see he has both ancestry, African, Hamite, as well as Asian, so does, you know, he. But this was a photo that some of the people in this particular photo I actually showed in the 400-year video that I did, and, you know, this guy might, you know, have some Asian ancestry. You can clearly see that, you know, but not these other people. You know, Chief Sullivan that I covered in my other video, and his daughter, as well as, you know, these brothers and sisters here. But look at these people. These people don't look Asian. The sister she was in the other video, she doesn't look Asian. Now, this person, of course, is a white woman, you know, pretending to be our people, because you got to understand, this particular picture was done in the 1920s, and by that time, you know, these people had already infiltrated not only our lands, but they began to force their genetic assimilation to try to mix our people out, and that's why some of the people started to change and began to look like, you know, Asian, like this guy. But notice the rest of these people in the photo don't look like that. You know, these brothers back here, you know, don't look like that. Okay? I'm just showing you. They don't. So, it's just that simple. Now this is a perfect example of what I'm saying as well. I mean, if you look at this particular, I mean, this really, in the ignorance of these people, how are you going to take these two different phenotypes, okay? And this is just, half of this is common sense. The other the other half is just having common sense and a basic understanding. You don't need to be a professor in genealogy, you know, to understand just genetics 101, that certain people have different phenotypes that identify them, okay, to their various groups. So, for example, if you look at this woman on the left, you could clearly see she's one of our people. Look at the eyes. She has wider eyes. She does not have almond-like Asian eyes. She doesn't have Asian features, okay? Our people tend to have very long, you know, our people had long, thick hair. Some of it was wavy, you know, and some of the hair was like sheep's wool, okay? But we had very natural curly hair, you know, culmination of both, really, in our tribes. But if you look at this woman on the right, she looks nothing like this one, you know, one of our people here that happens to be on the left. This is one of our people. And how you think this woman looks like an Asian, I have no clue, okay? This is just the stupidity of these people that are pretending to be our people. If you look at this woman, and I've seen this photo on Pinterest, by the way, and under that photo there's actually some verbiage that indicates this woman was, I think she was from one of the more, I'm just trying to remember the area, but it's like the French West Indies, I think. But at any rate, she was, they said in the picture, she was of African, half African ancestry, as well as Indian. Now, again, that word is very ambiguous, because you gotta understand, they also associate Indians with not only the West, but the East. So this woman, clearly, I'm going to tell you, she looks Dravidian. She is of Dravidian ancestry, not only African, you know, somebody in her family was African, but also of the Dravidian. This is what even the Aboriginals, if you look at some of the Aboriginals in Australia, they look like her. Or even you can go further, very deep into South Asia, you know, go deep into southern India. As you go more south into India, the people tend to be a little bit darker in complexion, much darker than the ones that got mixed out of the Germanic ancestry. So But that's what she looks like. She is of that Dravidian, heritage, that Dravidian stock, East Indian. You can see it. Look at the hair, the silky hair. Our people didn't have, we had wavy hair and naturally curly hair as well as a sheep's wool hair, thick hair, but we did not have silky straight hair like this. We just don't, that's not part of our phenotype. This is more of the Dravidian phenotype, okay, as well as Caucasian, straight hair, really straight like that, okay. So, let's keep it going. And again, how do you confuse these people? Again, the Mongolian stock, clearly, these are people from, across the Bering Strait, the Mongolian stock from, one of our people, this woman over here on the left, who again, does not look like these people, nor does she for that matter, okay? It's ridiculous. But what they did was they took all these people, put them in this little, put them all in these photographs, under this premise, very ignorant premise of all darkies look alike. I mean, that's where this is coming from, and it's very offensive to me. It's extremely offensive. Because, first of all, if you're a person, whether you're a Hamite or Shemite, you should know better. Just, if you have any level of common sense, let alone intelligence. So anyway, but there are a lot of these guys pretending to be us that got these type of videos where they just take a whole bunch, and a lot of it is just about confusion, and they just throw all these photos up of these Asian Mongolian people and say they're Israelites, and it's just not true. Okay, yes, they're mixed with African, the Canaanite people that were living here, Hamites, as well as the Mongolian stock. Okay, some of them, are. It's just that simple. So the other thing I want to show you is just a few more photographs of our people as well. And just so you can understand, the phenotype of our people, the children of Shem, is very, very different. As you can see, this little girl, she's from the Shinnecock tribe. Oops. And she looks very, very different. She has very large eyes, prominent eyes. Our eyes tend to be a lot wider, prominent, just like her. Look how similar they look. Okay, she's also Shinnecock. Okay, and she's not a black Mexican. That's just not true. I saw another picture of this gal. She's Shinnecock. Okay. Same thing here. He's a Shinnecock. Notice the eyes, our people also had an aquiline nose as well as broader noses, but also aquiline noses. That was another thing the colonists, when they, saw what our people looked like, they had described them with the, aquiline, long, narrow noses. We had both as in our, part of our phenotype. And this gal, she's from the Wampanoag. And actually, I want to show you another picture of her later. He's from Shinnecock. And these people don't look like Mongols, okay? I mean, really. He looks nothing like this guy over here. Yes, this guy is Mongolian and Asian, Eurasian ancestry. You can look at him. Okay? European. When I said Eurasian ancestry, really. Okay. She's Cherokee. Okay, that's, one of my people. I like to say Sharaka in our language. As well as this sister here. She's also Cherokee. But as you can see, the similarities of the phenotype of our people, we just look very different. And also I want to cover another thing that describes all of this. So there is a section here, and this is a book that I have online. It is called, this book is called The Ancient Hebrews. It's by, it was written by a guy by the name of Gerd Mueller, and this is taken from a book that was written by a 9th century rabbi, okay, and it says there, in this particular quote of this book I have, The Ancient Hebrews, it says, there is also the testimony of the 9th century AD Jewish Commentary on the Early Bible by Perka de R. Eliezer. It's something that refers to Rabbi Eliezer the Great, which is, you know, kind of silly because no man is great, but we're going to keep it going. That was just the name of the book. It says, he's quoting from it, and this was written around the 9th century. It says, he, Noah, especially increased Shem and his sons, making them dark and, not but, and calmly, and he gave them the habitable earth. He increased Ham and his sons, making them dark like a raven. So I want to stop right there. So do you understand? Whoever this rabbi was, he was making a distinction. They've always known that the children, our people, the children of Shem, that we have always been, brown people. They've always known that. Okay, and notice that's why he made the distinction. That there were. Remember, Noah had two sons of color. Okay, two sons with hue. He had Ham and Shem. But notice the distinction the guy makes, this rabbi makes, is that the difference is that, yeah, he had two sons that were brown skin, okay, dark, but one was dark like a raven. You understand? And that's why when you see these pictures of these Hamites that were living in the lands, they're so much darker. If you look at Hamitic peoples, they typically are dark. Some of them are very dark like a raven. Okay? And it just depends what region of Kemet they're coming from. Okay, certainly not all, but I'm saying the ones living in this land, as you can see by some of those pictures that the colonists drew, they showed them very, very dark. Okay? And they weren't dressed like our people. Okay? And so one of the other things that I wanted to point out was I wanted to show you this particular publication called, I'm sure you've heard of Scholastic. It was one of those, it's a publishing firm, and they actually have a magazine, and they published an article. And this article, this particular magazine, it was featured. This was done pretty recently. Literally done in 2015. And this particular feature, it's called Growing Up in the 1620s. And if you notice, they're showing you a picture of, you have a Caucasian boy that's dressed up like a pilgrim on the left, and on the right you see there is a, one of our people, an indigenous, American, on the right. And by the way, she is not, she's not a Native American, meaning that they're not showing you some Mongoloid people, a Mongoloid person or child that, typically the so-called modern Native American living in, they got in our lands today. So you got to ask yourself a question. Again, this was published only a couple, like 2015. This recent publication, it says here, in 1620, the Pilgrims came to America. They met people who already lived here called the Wampanoag. Because she's Wampanoag. Now, you got to ask yourself the question, why was Scholastic, okay, why would they sit here and publish a particular feature on the New World in the 1620s, okay, in their publication showing a pilgrim and an indigenous person looking like one of our people, not one of these Mongols or what you saw in that video I showed you, that, why would they do that if they did not know what the original people, the indigenous people actually look like? You understand, people, white folks lie by omission. They'll omit some things, but they tend to omit the rest, okay, and hide that information. But, in this one, they're basically showing you what the people look like, because in the 1600s, they already knew what they looked like. They knew when the colonists came, they knew what the people looked like, and that's why in many of their you know, in their books, you find that they will describe the people as swarthy, you know, dark-skinned people, okay? And that's, you know, why would they show this, this little girl, you know, as an indigenous, looking like our people, if they actually were, you know, if the indigenous people were the Mongols? So, because it helps you to understand that white folks know our history. They know our history better than, unfortunately, many of our people do. They know it better than we do, okay? Many of our people. And that's why they like to hide the information, but every now and then, you know, they're going to give you some breadcrumbs. Hence why you have this particular publication, which I think is really good, you know, that they, you know, it's there, but she certainly does not look like a Hamite, okay? And again, this is just further proof of what, you know, I've already shown. So the other thing I wanted to show you is that the word calmly in the book I showed you in Ancient Hebrews, I had mentioned that the rabbi Eliezer had described, you know, in the 9th century, the book he had written, had described, again, Noah has 2 sons, you know, that are men of color, and he described one as dark and the other one both dark, but one was dark as a raven. And he used the term associated with Shem as dark and calmly. Now that word calmly, if you look up that word, now typically in the Hebrew, the word is Nawah, but typically in Hebrew, when you check the concordance, they associate it with a female, beauty of a female. But if you really look up the word calmly, it means, you know, it's a neuter adjective, really, because if you look at the word, it's more neuter specific, meaning it describes both male and female. Because here it says, you know, in the Webster's it says it's good look. It means good looking, handsome, pleasing, or agreeable to the sight, well proportioned. Okay, and then what's interesting is that word calmly or calmliness. You see how, you know, this word, it is very interesting because, like I said, words have meaning, and there are certain sounds in a language that associates words, and that's very interesting. And that word calmly is extremely important, and I'm going to kind of drill into that a little bit further, more in depth, and probably I'll do a lecture on that in another video, because that is a completely different lecture, but it is associated with something else, another word that I think is very important. And you're gonna, I gotta tell you, brothers and sisters, you're gonna really, really like that video. But I did want to point that out. So to refute this guy, because again, these people don't know our language is these people that pretend to be our people. If you look up, let's go to that 2-letter lookup. If you look at the word itself, did you ever wonder why did our people wear feathers? Now, we have these idiots that are pretending to be our people, and you know, these so-called Hamites, or the ones that are ignorant, you know, trying to cause all this confusion. The ignorant ones, you know, that say everybody wore fringes. Yeah, but one of the other things that made our people very unique was the fact that we wore feathers. And you ever ask yourself the question, well, why do we wear feathers? Well, if we go look at the word feather, okay, in our language, okay, we get Ibera, which is the same word that's derived from the word Hebera, okay, which is what they, from that word is why they, you know, the word Hebrew, okay, derives. And when you look at the meaning of the word, it says the word, it means feather and wing, okay? So we have got to ask ourselves, well, why do you think we were wearing feathers? It's because that's even in the name. It's what our name means. The feather, you know, feather people. We wore feathers, and that's why we wore feathers. You understand? No, I truly believe there's no such things as coincidences. There are things that are part of a people's nature, and that's why they do the things they do. Okay, and the only time when they're not doing things that are part of their nature, you know, especially when you're talking about their ancestral heritage, it's because they're following the way of another people. Okay, but our people, you know, we had an understanding of who we were, who we are today. You know, we have an understanding of who we are. I mean, our people back in those days knew who they were, even though most of our people don't know who they are today. And that's why they were wearing feathers. So when those colonists landed, that's how they knew that we were, you know, the children of Jacob. You know, who they call the children of Israel, is because they saw them feathers. Okay. And then if you want to go even further, if you need further proof on all this, brothers and sisters, I'm going to tell you straight up. Let's just check out, let's type in this word that they like to use. Everybody wears fringes, hey? So let's go look up that word. You know, get in KJV. And this is why I say understanding language. The language, more importantly, the ancient language of your people. It's just not, you know, hope that gain any understanding of, you know, the writings of our people. That, you know, it is not only important, it is vital. So if you look at Numbers 15:38, you know, talks about the fringes. Speak unto the children of Jacob and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments. So let's stop there and look up the word. So when we go look up at that word, fringes, $67.34 tells you fringe and lock over here, fringe, tassel, lock. But if we look further down, it says, so you understand, these people that we were dealing with really didn't quite understand, you know, our language. Okay, so you know, it says, so they improvised. Okay, so but here's what it says. It says a floral or wing-like projection, a wing-like projection. Now, why is that important? We go further down. They weren't quite sure what it exactly meant, because it says here something like a flower or feather. Okay, goes right back to feather. Okay, so they like to say everybody wore fringes, yeah, but not everybody wore feathers. And to answer the next thing that some of these clowns might, you know, say is that, well, yeah, the Canaanites, you know, those Hamites that were living in the land, they wore feathers too. But here's the difference. Our people even wore our feathers very unique. The Canaanites were wearing their feathers kind of straight in the air, but our people wore our feathers a little bit differently, you know. And sometimes we did wear it in the air, but mostly our feathers were going back. But here's what's also very important about that. You gotta understand, these people, okay, our enemies, these people like to covet. You know, remember Psalm 83, okay? You know, what does it say in Psalm 83? That they have committed crafty counsel, okay? And in that verse, they were talking about some groups. They were talking about Edomites, they were talking about Canaanites and Moabites, our enemies. And to this day, they still, okay, have conspired against our people to steal our land. So in order to steal people's lands, when you want to steal people's land, you know, the other thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try to steal their identity. And even those Canaanites were imitating our people. And that's why I suspect they were wearing feathers. Okay? You know, when you think about why were they wearing feathers in the land? It's because, I'm going to tell you why they were wearing feathers. They were wearing feathers is because they were, again, they were coveting all of our territories in the east and the west. Why not our identity? And to this day, this is why these Hamites run around, just like this guy, trying to pretend that they are indigenous to this land. And some of them, these Moors, even pretend, you know, and lie about telling, you know, saying that they're the children of Jacob. And the reason why they say that, they're not going to tell you they're Canaan, because they don't want to be associated with Canaan, and you know, for obvious reasons. Okay, you know the whole story of Canaan. So this is the deception that's going on with our enemies. Not only have they coveted our territory, both the, sons of Japhet, but also some of the, the sons of Ham, Canaan. Okay, that particular son. We covered our lands and, covered our goods and, of course, why not our identities? To pretend to replace us, and this is what they're doing. And to this day, they're still doing it, just like they were doing it in the ancient world. And that's why they were wearing those feathers. I'm telling you, just like they were invading all our lands. Alrighty, so let's talk about, because, I thought about all of this, when you look at history, and that's why it's always good to take a look back, in retrospect at history, because it tells the story. Just like these whites, they were coveting our lands, both in the east, to Israel, the land that they're occupying today, pretending to be our people. And just like they implanted their own seed in our lands, occupying and squatting our territories now. Did they not teach these people to pretend to be us, just like in the east and the west? Learn, faked our customs, and showed them, how to dress like us here in the West. Again, there's nothing new under the sun. It's the same old foolishness. Their playbook is the same. Okay, wherever they go. So that's how you know what's up. So let's take a look at this book that I want to cover that talks about, again, further documentation of our history in our indigenous land. This was written back in the 1800s, around 1843, by a guy named, I think, George Jones, maybe? Yeah. But anyway, it's called Ancient America founded upon the ruins of antiquity, the identity of the Aborigines with the people of Tyrians and Seir. Okay? Now, and it says, on this page, more detail, history of ancient America anterior to the time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites. Okay, and why that's really significant is they're talking about the Tyrians. They're using the word Tyrians, and the Tyrians is just another. It's a couchy word they use for Phoenicians, or Canaanites. It's the same word. Okay. Same meaning anyway, same people. Let's put it that way. So I'm not going to cover too much of this, but enough for you to get the point. And it says, let's see here. Okay, a couple things I want to point out. It says, the present writer will not yield to any man in the firm belief that the Aborigines of North America, but North America only, and the ancient Israelites are identical. Did you hear what I just said? Identical, unless controverted by the stern authority of superior historical deductions. So we're going to stop right there. So he's basically telling you that this man, based on his research, is telling you that the people in North America, that is our people, the ancient Israelites. Okay? Let's keep going. I'm going to skip the page. Hold on. Okay. Alright, and this is very interesting here. So it says, for the convenience of the general reader, the word Mexican, until the true name is established, will be applied throughout the following pages to all Central and South America. So he's just kind of using the term they use today, Mesoamerica, but he's associated with, both Central and South America. For the word South may be confounded with that portion of the Republic of North America, so denominated, and especially with the American reader. So then he says, the fundamental, so in other words, he wants to make a distinction, okay? He's using the word Mexican for Central and South America. He doesn't want the word to be confused, so he's using Mexican for those areas, and then North America, he's just calling North America here. So it says, the fundamental error with all writers upon the Aborigines of America is that they have viewed them as one people, Does this sound familiar, like this clown that, wrote into my, wrote on my channel and commented? Yeah, sounds real familiar. Authors have therefore been confounded by the different customs and ceremonies of religion as practiced in the two great divisions of the continent, that they have seen that the natives were to a certain extent in one part of the vast domain idolaters and not in the other, but the North was essentially republican in every aspect of its political existence. Okay, while as Mexican American was essentially composed of kingdoms of empires and governed by despotic monarchs. So in other words, they're saying in the North, people were practicing something very different than what they were practicing in Central and South America, or what they call Mexican America. In Mexican America, those people were, they were idolaters. They were practicing paganism. So it helps you to make the distinction. Yes, these people knew. Okay, these colonists knew there were distinctly two different peoples living in the Americas. Okay. Now we're going to keep going here. Okay, just a few more things I wanted to cover here. I think you'll find very, very interesting. Okay, he goes on to talk about the origins of this term Indian, so-called term. He says, the reader perhaps will meet us at the threshold of argument by the question, how can an Indian be of Israel? Yeah, good point. We will answer this and refute the misnomer before the analogies are investigated. The name Indian as applied to the original inhabitants of either or both the Americas, Canada, the islands in or adjacent to the Gulf of Mexico has no authority founded upon truth. The name was given in error and has been so continued from this day, of course, so continued from the time of the Genoese to the present day. Throughout this work, no position will be advanced that cannot be defended. The wrongful appellation originated with Columbus, go figure, and for proof of the assertion, the following is presented. So I'm not going to cover all of that, but in a nutshell, the whole term, was due to, that fool Columbus, when he, what he's telling you, on the next page is that when he took his passage, he used the same passage when he was traveling to, what they call the New World here. He took the same passage as sea route as Marco Polo, the East Indies route. And when he arrived here, the first island he arrived on, he just basically associated it with the East Indies, because that's where he thought he was. He thought he was in the western part. So that's why he called it, the West Indies. The first island he landed on. So, of course, due to him and his ignorance, of course. But let's continue. Okay, so in this particular chapter, chapter 2, I'm not going to cover all of this. He discusses how the Hebrew customs of the people living in the north, our people, were identical to the our people, children of the book, children of Jacob. So he discusses, the mother, the customs of how the mother basically, the mother's purification. In the scriptures it says was to last 40 days for a male and 80 days for a female child, and how they were practicing the same customs according to the law of Moses. I'm not going to cover all of that here. It also talks about he's referring to all the customs. He also mentions there are people also who is familiar with the Passover. He says the northern, in this part here, it says the northern Aborigines have a traditional knowledge of the deluge. Okay, so in other words, our people were aware of the flood that occurred during the days of Noah. That's what the deluge means. And the dove of peace, which to them under the name of the medicine, or a mystery bird from the arrow of the hunter. Now, when you say he said that, we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, and then he also says that they had an Ark of the Covenant here that was in the form, I guess it was shaped like a shell. And so he talks about that here too. I'm not going to read all that. I think you get the point. Okay, let's talk about the medicine bag. He says, medicine bag or pouch is carried by every member of the tribe. It is suspended to a bead belt which crosses from the breast by passing over the left shoulder and hangs on the right side. Okay, it says it contains what they believe to be preservatives to keep from sickness or defeat. So let's talk about that medicine bag. He says it crosses over the left of the shoulder and hangs to the right side. So I'm going to show you this picture really quick. This is a picture that was taken from the John Carter Brown archives, and this was dated around, this was done, or not picture, excuse me, this was drawn by a guy, I think by Arnaldus Montanado, whatever. But this was done, he had sketched this around 1671. And what's interesting is he is wearing a sash draped around the left side of his shoulder in this photograph, and something here looks like a little sack. See, as I said, it's important to study history. When you study history and you study, from an archaeological and artifact perspective, the historical aspects of history has, the details are very important. Because there are things, like I said, that are just inherent in the nature of a people. And you find a lot of that in the historical and archaeological evidence. You see, he's got this little bag, a little pouch here, and guess what? Where's the drape? It's draped on the left side of his shoulder, okay, and the pouch is on the right. There's no such thing in life as, I strongly believe that there's no such thing as coincidences, okay? Of course, they're wearing fringes, okay? It just helps you to understand. So, let's continue, shall we? And then he also says, then the absence of all idols or symbolical devices, that there was an absence of all idols. Okay, so our people did not, we weren't involved in idol worship or symbolical devices. Okay, and we, of course, had the worship of, he says, of one God. Okay, of course, our Creator, the Most High. Makes sense. And then one of the other things I think is very important is that he says, one fact is of great importance is proof of their great antiquity. They have no knowledge or tradition in the north of the life or crucifixion of Christ, yet they have a knowledge of the deluge, that's the flood, and actually practice the laws of Moses, period. So, of course, our people didn't have any knowledge of the so-called Christ, because, the whole Jesus thing was just something that, again, a construct, something made up by, white men, okay, in their so-called Greek Testament. That's why it's not found in the original writings of our people, the original Testament. But there you have it, okay, and that's just, somebody documenting it. This information is very important. And again, for these ignorant people that, like to cause confusion, because that's what they're paid to do, by our enemies, I laugh because, this guy out of ignorance said all of this. They say, well, everybody wears fringes, but these are the same people that say, well, Hamites came over on the boat from West Africa, and the problem with that is, well, and they say, okay, well, a lot of the West Africans practice, well, and their theory also is because they believe, they really think that, they pretend, the people pretend to be us, are coming up with this narrative, and then some are just out of ignorance, really, because they just don't know, they really don't understand their history, but they use the narrative, they buy into the whole white narrative that, we have been, spoon-fed, for over 400 years, that, yeah, we came over on ships. But here's the problem with that. And they say, well, the reason why is that also, Africans, they practice a lot of the same things, and everybody wears fringes. But here's the problem. How do you explain to people living in these lands, in the north, that colonists saw, okay, and documented, right, in their own, in in their own books, how do you explain these people that were observing? Because they say, oh yeah, well there were stones, or tablets, the people that are putting out this rhetoric about us just coming over, from ships in Africa, that we weren't here already. They say, well, yeah, everybody wears fringes, and by the way, because there were some tablets in written in Hebrew. Well, here's the problem with that theory, is that it's an oxymoron to even say that, because what did our people do? Did we write tablets? We came over here more than, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, we wrote these tablets, and then we jumped back on a ship and went back to, where they think we came from, Negro land in Africa? Or the East, the Middle East, they call Israel today? It makes no sense. The reason why those tablets were here, that they found all these writings of our people in tablets, because we were already here for thousands of years. And the other thing is, how do you explain the customs of the people that were living in the north, that were following, the way of our Creator, the laws of the Most High that He gave us? Just like they say, well, African tribes were, some of them in Africa, they observe our practice. Well, how do you explain the people here? You understand? Because the people that came over in ships, if you use that narrative, that's a bunch of nonsense, because they were already being, indoctrinated in Christianity by the time they got here. Okay? So no, they didn't teach our people anything. Alright? And then another problem with their theory is that they say that there were, 10 million? Numbers always change in 12 million, 10 million, 10 million, whatever. That there were 10 million people that were brought over to, Americas and Europe, from the transatlantic. But if you notice, if you look at a lot of the numbers on this, and somebody else, a brother by the name of Tavis and his mother, did a really good video that actually was showing how the numbers were skewed. They keep changing the numbers, because the more you start doing the crunching the numbers that they claim, because they claimed out of the so-called 10 million or so people that came over on ships on the transatlantic, if you look at those numbers, I mean, a very small fraction of people came over to, the largest amount of people were taken, came from Africa, that were from Africa, were shipped over to Europe. Out of that 10 million, the majority of them were in Europe, sent to Europe and South America. But less than, it was a ridiculous percentage. It was like the lowest percentage was shipped to North America. First they said it was about 300,000, but when Tavis and his mom did the research, and some other folks, the numbers got skewed, and they did a really great lecture on it. The number was lowered to, because some other folks did some research on it, how many people came to North America, and it went from 300,000 when they started really crunching the numbers to less than that. It was roughly somewhere around 200,000 or so, or maybe even as few as 100, just over 100,000. So you got to ask yourself, the question, numbers keep changing, is because they know that they, again, they lie about history. So you got to ask yourself the question, if only, and I'm being conservative, let's say 200,000 came over to North America, and that's the fewest number. Why was so few people over? And there's something in this book actually that explains that too. Let me see if I can find it real quick, brothers and sisters, because I think it's important. I'm glad I brought that up. Might be in here if I can find it. So in this book, it says, I was reading it, and it says something to the effect that when they came here, there were about 12 million of us here in North America. So that's why I brought that up. I'd have to look for it, but I can't find it right now. But the reason why that is very significant, what he's saying, is it's very important. Just trying to see if I can find it here. Is if there were 12 million of us already here, and he states that in here, then it helps you to understand that's why the slaves that they brought over, I'm not saying they brought people over, but they weren't our people. The majority of those people were not our people, and the reason why is because our people were already here. Okay, now naturally they wiped, a fair amount of our people out. Okay, but the reason why the fewest number, the lowest number was brought to North America. I'm talking less than, I told you, less than 300,000. It was like roughly probably 150, 200,000 people. If at that was brought over to North America, is because there were people already here, millions of people in North America. I ain't talking about South, America, where the Hamites were, and in Central America initially, before they started coming over to our land here in the north as well, North America. But when they brought people over on ships, the reason why there was the fewest in North America was because we were already here. Okay, the guy said in this book, like 12 million of us were already here. And that's really important, it's extremely significant. They weren't Hamites, because he was talking about the North. He said North America, just like he said North America, the customs were different than those people. You understand? So these things are all very, very, very relative, brothers and sisters. And, that's what I really wanted to point out. Here's another book that I want to show you. This book was actually printed in 1650. Let's see if I can show you here. Somewhere around here. Yeah, it was issued like 1650 and printed. And this book was written by a guy named, I think, John Dory, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, but this book says, it's titled Jews in America, and again, this is done in the 1600s. It was printed, Jews in America, or Probabilities that the Americans are of that race. Okay? Now, why would he say that, okay, if these people thought they were Hamites? The reason why is because there were two different people, the guy already said in the other book, and they had different customs, the other people, the Hamites that were living in this land, okay, from our people, the Shemites, okay? And it's just that simple. Okay? And they were trying to make them Christian, as it says here, with the removal of some contrary reasonings and earnest desires for effectual endeavors to make them Christian. Okay? Because our people, we had our own way of life. We weren't caught up in no Christianity, alright? Since obviously we were we were here. And I mean, that's pretty much, I think, the main thing that I wanted to, all of the things I wanted to point out here in my lecture today. I think that concludes it. I think I've shown you, I think our people get it, because we are like mine. It's these people that, these people operating, with the Hamitic mindset that are not our people, pretending to be our people. And I just wanted to respond to those people, the guy that wrote in, to refute the nonsense and the confusion that these people are causing among, our community. So once again, thank you so much, and may the Most High continue to make you prosperous. Shalom.